Hi again, and I was just showing you the cover of the book and some of the information that you would need to find in order to get the book. Um, all right, so back to creation for a little bit, and some of the things that we're bought into through our schools and upbringing and those kinds of things are things that are not necessarily true. Um, when you look at evolution, they're claiming these are things that are written in the book. I'm just expanding on them here. They're probably even written better in the book, but this is just a review. Um, what is what did modern science, or as science was developing in this new age of evolution, um, they were at one time they actually believed, like, if you had a pile of rags, you know, somehow or another that was involved in, you know, making mice. I know it sounds bizarre, but that was a scientific theory at one time. So, and of course now they see that the mice, they like to hide, and of course they reproduce, and it's not the way that somebody was saying anyway. So there's some things out there that are strange, but nonetheless, people have their opinions. So what is it that modern science is doing? Aren't they doing basically the same thing? I mean, if you really think about it, they're saying everything started from some kind of small vertebrae or bacteria, whatever it is, in the water, and then eventually kept getting bigger. And so just like the mouse was undercover, well, those things in the water brought about the same things again. Um, they didn't turn into some half man and half Aquaman and, the animals and stuff. No, the Bible is quite clear, and it is true that the model that you have here on earth, where there's a predisposition of all the living things, whether it's a seed in a plant, a tree, a pine tree, whatever, it brings about its own kind. There's no crossover. I watch nature in my backyard all the time, and the different species stay within themselves. And maybe if you could, have a hybrid of some kind or a crossover, it's not a natural thing that God had originally done. And it's not to say that science can't do something like that. But the problem with that is that, is man really trying to improve on the economy of God? Is he saying he can do something better than God? And that in itself is a problem. So you'll see over the years that there was an uproar over cloning and these kinds of things. The church didn't want that to happen. They didn't want to have the petri dish baby, that type of thing. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Once the person's there and they're on their way to being something, well, they're human then. And that brought them to the other part where they're using cells and stuff like this, and the big controversy over cloning and cells and using fertilized eggs and that. So what could happen? Really, if you think about it, there's things that go awry. I think they did the honeybee thing, and they transformed it with some other kind of bee, and the next thing you know, they got a killer bee on your hands. It was an unexpected result. And what if you did clone or make a human being? You're making something, where you're putting things together. What if you're missing something? Now, when a person is alive, sure, they're human, and they're entitled to all the things that God would want you to have. But what if that got into the population? What if I was a clone per se, and the next thing you know, my future wife didn't know where I came from or whatever, and we had children, and what if there was something missing? Right, didn't live as long, or got some kind of disease or something like that. I mean, we get diseases anyway, but I mean, this is something that could get into the population and could cause some dramatic changes. You're going to say, well, okay, yeah, you're not a scientist. No, look, I'm just telling you right now, there's the out-of-control laboratory. And that out-of-control laboratory could do great damage. You know, if you don't have any way to curb exactly what you're doing, experimentation, especially when you get into the human end of it. I mean, this was tried. It was disastrous things that were tried during World War II. Just things that, you know, we can't even talk about. They're so horrific. But, you know, trying to figure out the human, their ability to withstand this, that. You know, this is really a sick thing. And so we have to be careful, if you're a scientist, that you're not going off and experimenting with things that maybe really were created by God. So back to the idea that the seed of the animals and whatever it is has a predisposition already in it to bring about the same thing over and over. And that is the true model. This other model of, this coming to that, and, you know, in time. You know, I was down in Florida and they got the manatees. Oh, they're related to the elephant. Well, okay, so here we go again. Your children are in school and, you know, they got to go along with the program because they're state-run or the federal government or whatever. They're going to push the program, and now you're learning things in that school and in science that is not going to be relevant to you, but it might distance you from your understanding of what God is. You know, the Bible is very clear, and I have to use it as a reference. God proclaims that He is seen in nature, you know, in nature itself, and that man is without excuse before God because of that. So, yes, you can see something in nature that is unexplainable on many levels. So, but what is it about the spiritual man? You know, people, we don't want to know about the Bible. We don't care. It has no relevance here. Well, that's true, because the natural man, that's me, you, don't discern the things of God because they're spiritually discerned. And when we look at the earth and the things, you know, if you read the creeds and things in Christianity, there's a lot more to the picture than we know. The seen and the unseen. Angels, things like this. And if you really check into Judaism and Christianity, you'll see, you know, miraculous things happening. The burning bush that wasn't consumed, the Moses or Aaron's staff that turned into a snake and consumed Pharaoh's, you know, magicians and stuff, they're snakes. You know, so there's things here that go beyond what we can see here. And then we have examples of Christ walking on water. You know, these are things that go contrary to the science that we know, or Christ ascending into the heavens. I mean, come on. This is something that is not a normal thing, but yet, you know, if God is in control of everything and He has the ability to do that, well, then you're going to find that what I'm saying is true. And again, you know, I just want to point out that the church isn't asking me, you know, or commissioned me to say anything, but these are things that, you know, I don't know if the normal person thinks about them, but I did. And then when you find the Bible and there's certain verses and things that are in there that are contradictory to what's out there, then you're going to see that major difference. So in creation, we have to understand that it was miraculous. If God made things out of nothing, science and nature become the gift after the miraculous creation. then that's where they come in. Now we can agree that we can measure things to some degree and understand things and then find things here because the doctors and these people are ordained of God to find remedies and things like that. So you're not on your own. We're dependent on other. So the doctor has recourse to kings. Here's the king. You think he's going to be all alone up there? No. God gives the doctor recourse to him. So he's not an island unto himself. And by that standard, nobody really is. So those are things that you really need to think about as far as nature. Nature is the gift, and science is the gift from God. It shouldn't become your God. That's where the problem comes in. When you make science and nature your God, now you got a problem. Then you're going to discount everything. You know, if you compare the aftermath science to modern science, I believe the same things and a lot of the stuff that modern science does. It's just that I don't believe the way they've come around and kind of force-fed everybody into this evolutionary process that's really kind of devoid of God. I think they're in a Scopes trial or Darwin and these people. I mean, they were great lawyers and everything, but the fact of the matter is that for centuries that was the teaching, and nobody was saying that you couldn't, under certain rules, have those things. But what happened was down through the time, then it became, you can't, the separation of church and state, which brings us to the founding fathers of our country. Now, if you get the book, you'll see it says the Declaration of Independence, where God is the creator, man is created and endowed by the creator with liberty and all those things, the attributes in pursuit of happiness. Well, what were these founding fathers talking about? Were they making up some new kind of God? No, the creator and all that, and the way they describe him, that comes right out of the Bible. So when our country was in its infancy, they weren't making some new God. And if you check out George Washington, his prayers and stuff, they all included Jesus Christ and everything else. So they were Christian men for the most part. And the people of the country that were here prior to them, whether they came from England, Germany, France, Spain, they bent their knee here, put the flag on the ground, and for God and country. These were all Christian countries. You get to King Henry VIII, and there was some bad blood between him and the Pope, and that was the end of that. So, and this is not part of it, and I'm not condemning anything, but anyway, all of England then was converted to, the Church of England under the King, because he felt that he was ordained of God and he was greater than the Pope or whatever. But no, there's two offices there, and they don't mix, and then it was just bad. So all the people followed this king, and he did brutal things to his wives and that. So, I mean, if that's the teacher of what it is that you believe in, and I don't know, I find a problem with that. But they believe in God, they believe in Jesus Christ, and God bless them. That's the way it is right now. However, when we look at the founding fathers coming here to this country, they had the Constitution after the Declaration of Independence. And basically, they should be considered one document. The Constitution of the United States wanted freedom of religion. They wanted the people to have recourse. And all the elections and everything, I mean, all the laws and things, if you look at it, there's no denying that. I don't care who the lawyer is, it's going to come up here and say something different. It's not. All the books, all the states and whatever, everything was based on the Ten Commandments, shall not steal, adultery. All these things were in place. And of course, down through the years, savage lawyers came in, and they offshoot off their belief of this separation of church and state, which is erroneous. And then of course down, and they're making laws and things that go against the consciences of other people. So the founding fathers, in my estimation, really, if you look at it, they had no idea. It's easy to be a backseat quarterback and say, oh, this is what they should have. No, they had no idea that the United States of America would start embracing and bringing people in that this freedom of religion. Whose religion then? And who, when you have an argument like that, there ain't no more religion. The melting pot of the world. So, in my estimation, not that they were not far-sighted, but they were short-sighted. They never would have conceived in their wildest imagination that this country would start reverting back to paganism. Now, I'm not against people that have different beliefs than me, but when you start condemning the core beliefs that made the country great, and you're not having anymore, you start taking out the 10 Commandments and that. These men that came here, they knew the Bible, they knew the 10 Commandments. Our laws were based on the 10 Commandments and then the New Testament. The things that Jesus Christ brought, the morals and ethics. Reconfirming again, because he was a Jew under Judaism, reconfirming the 10 Commandments. So the laws of the land and the people that ran for office for the first 150 years, these were all Christian people. And this country grew, and the greatness of it. Now today we're still a great country, and I realize the fact that there's other people that are not my so-called Christian neighbor, and they're here. I got to get along with everybody. So that's what's happening today. But in the meantime, you're losing a lot of the ethics that you had, and you're starting to slip into the country's starting to, I think, slip back into a lot of paganism practices and things like that. And the interests, the people have changed. There's so many variables that the country was about. Through science, women didn't have to have the number of children, they had protection under that, and the church, and they're always against that kind of practice, and even to this day. So everybody's fighting against whatever the rules are, and they want to have it their own way. So am I saying I don't like you because of it? No. This is the history. There isn't anything that I'm saying here that isn't historically true. It is true. And that's where we're at today under those circumstances. So when we look at the Constitution, and they came up with this ideology of a separation of church and state, well, that's a ridiculous understanding. If it's one nation under God or whatever, then where does God come into that picture historically? He doesn't. So the country right now is trying to accept all things for all people, and you're becoming this big gigantic melting pot, and we're in trouble. People now are embracing the very things that we fought against in World War II. Communism, socialism. Now it's the new brand, but they don't realize the dangers in that and how this country could really suffer, immensely. So though I don't get into that in the book. I suppose I'm a little off course here, but the idea is that when we trace the history of man from the very beginning to Adam, there has to be a traceable history. And it's not the history that you were taught, where man was some kind of caveman. Well, I guess there were cavemen, when people were separated and they lived more in nature, they had to live in dwellings that, and then there's this a massive separation. So we're going to see that after the flood, whatever was the knowledge of those 8 souls that got into the ark, Noah and his family, that was all the information they took with them. So really, whatever was from the old world, and it could be really spectacular, it was lost. So the knowledge of man kind of went back to ground zero. And then there was another time in history, the confounding of the languages at the Tower of Babel, where God dispersed everybody. He felt that, they were making a stairway to heaven, they're building a brick something or other. And he thought that anything they conceived that they would do. So now we live in an era where the languages are coming back together again, and there is no barrier in language. So that's an interesting thing too, and we'll get into the subject of language too, because there's miraculous things that are happening there in language. It's and things that you'll be very interested in when we get to that point. But back to the Constitution, the Founding Fathers should have said that this was a Christian nation based on Christian morals and ethics, and that we do have freedom of religion. But that would have settled a lot of things. We wouldn't be having the problems that we had today. And I really honestly believe that they didn't realize that the world that they lived in was going to turn back to this paganistic thing. So that's where we're at. I'm a historian, and that's where the book is at. It's in history, and I'm talking about and writing about in that book the things about man, and we'll discuss this at a later time, how he actually came down. I'll leave you with this thought. It wasn't in the 16th century, when man was taking his boat out again, and he was discovering all these different continents with people on them. How did they get there? So he's rediscovering the world again, basically, and saying that there's people already living there. So how did that happen? God said he dispersed, confounded the language at the Tower of Babel. So if you come up with somebody that's got a different language and you're then on a chronological line that you could follow, that happened after the Tower of Babel, because there was a universal language up until that point. So anytime you come across people with a different language and you're wondering how they got there and everything else, well, now you know why. So the American Indians came here. They got here, the oceans were there. And then you're going to find something else fascinating, that there was no Continental Drift. That's another erroneous scientific explanation that the Earth was all one big massive form and then split. No. Never happened. The oceans were always there. The Bible's very clear. It said that God heaped up land, and that was the boundaries. They were set. Now, true, the water level changes and went up and down. People that live on the coasts and near lakes and rivers and that, you're always going to have the possibility that over the centuries that those coastal lines are going to change. I live up over here near Lake Michigan, outside Illinois here, and then you got people that are, in danger of losing their houses all the time, going into the water. That's because, because of the winds, the waves, and everything else. That changes the areas of the beaches and everything else. So if people buy property and they're buying stuff, there's always a danger. So of that too. But we'll get into that too, about how we've had changes, but probably the most dramatic changes we'll talk about happened after the flood, because then there was a new low, and maybe there was some climate change. It's possible, because the character of the earth changed too with it to some degree. Thanks again for listening, and again, love God, love your family, and love your country. Thanks for listening.